Hey everybody, my name's Josh Kittle, and I want to take a few minutes to talk to you a little bit about a topic that keeps coming up in the LightBurn support forums, and that's how do I configure LightBurn to communicate using IP or a computer network connection with my Ruida DSP. So let me try to demystify some of the networking complexities that exist in the computer networking world and really give you kind of a step-by-step walkthrough of how to configure your Ruida DSP with LightBurn software. Now, I'll start by saying I don't work for LightBurn. I'm just a member of the community. And so take this at face value, and hopefully this is useful for you as you play with your laser cutter. So first and foremost, what is a Ruida DSP? Well, a Ruida DSP, as shown here, is a combination of a microcontroller that is used to automate the functions of your laser and a keypad control panel to program and interface the microcontroller. So this thing's in charge of loading a file, running the motors, powering on and off the laser, etc. So this kind of runs the laser without it having to be hooked up to a computer. And these are most commonly found on things like Chinese import laser cutters like mine. So this is a picture of a laser cutter that's identical to the one that I have. And you'll see over there on the right-hand side a Ruida DSP control panel. So this is likely the type of machine or similar that you're using if you have a Ruida DSP. Now, there are two ways that the LightBurn software can communicate with your laser. Either option one, which is a USB cable plugged into your computer and then plugged into your laser. This is not the preferred approach, and I'll talk about why here in just a second. Or option two, across a computer network. So why would I want to use a computer network instead of a USB cable? Well, rule number one, or reason number one that I'm going to give you is USB cables are only good for a handful of feet. They don't cover a lot of distance. So unless your computer is sitting 3 feet away from your laser, this is going to get real inconvenient real quick. And you're going to want something that's always on, where you can just go to your computer, prepare your cutting job, and say, go. And not have to worry about walking over to the computer, plugging the cable in, and all the hassle that comes along with that. Option number two, the computer network. This is preferred because we're going to run an Ethernet cable, and it's going to be hooked up. And we're going to be able to communicate with it at any point, just like we would any other device on our network, like our printers or our network-attached storage or other computers. So it's a very straightforward approach. Now, let me talk a little bit about network topology. And I want to try to take some of the network engineering out of this and really simplify it for you. So this is an example of a network topology that you'll likely have in your house where you're trying to connect this Ruida DSP to your LightBurn workstation. So first and foremost, I want you to understand that computers on a network all have an address. We call this an IP address. Each device on your network is going to have a unique IP address. In this example, my computer has the IP address of 10.10.210.21. My laser cutter has the IP address of 10.10.210.60. There's another device, and it's shown here, and I'm going to call it a router, because that's the device most of you are going to be using in your house to connect your laser cutter to your computer. However, what's really at play here and what's really important is not that this is a router, because after all, the job that a router does is connect a private network to a public network. So it's going to connect your home network to the internet and offer some security and isolation there. But what's more important is what's inside the router. What's built inside of most routers that you're going to buy today is called a network switch. And in fact, you can use a network switch without the capability of a router all by itself. But, if you're setting this up and you know what I'm talking about, you probably don't need to be watching this video because you understand those things already. But for those of you who don't, it doesn't matter what brand, what manufacturer. All in all, you're just using the switch that happens to be inside your router. You could also, if you didn't need the computer that's going to be controlling the laser to have access to the internet, and the only thing it needed to do in life is talk to that laser, you could run a wire directly between the computer and the laser cutter, and these are most often referred to as crossover cables. And the reason we call them a crossover cable is because the transmit and receive wires inside the cable have been reversed so that this switch in the middle that normally handles swapping those pairs of wire between the devices is not needed. But again, if you're trying to do a crossover cable, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this conversation. I'm going to show you a video of going into the IP configuration on my Ruida DSP. You'll find that it is fairly straightforward to configure an IP address on your DSP and then subsequently go into LightBurn and point to it. Looking at my Ruida DSP here, I'm going to hit the ZU button and then I'm going to use the arrow keys to move down to the menu option here for IP config, and then I'm going to hit the enter button. You'll see in the bottom right hand corner here you've got an IP address. You can use the arrow keys here to move back and forth and set the appropriate IP address for use on your network. I've also configured a gateway on my laser so that if it needed to reach other networks, it would be able to do so. That's a bit more of an advanced topic than I'm going to cover here, but make sure in either case that you hit the enter key to save your settings. Now over to the computer. If you are opening LightBurn for the first time, the new device wizard is going to launch. It's going to ask you to pick your laser. In this example, we're going to go ahead and pick Ruida and click Next. It's now going to ask us if we're going to connect using Ethernet or serial. We're going to click Ethernet and click Next. Now it's going to ask us the IP address of the device. In this example, we're going to use 10.10.210.60. The rest of the setup is pretty straightforward. We're going to give it a name and tell it the length of our axis is and click Next. We're going to tell it the origin of our laser. Mine is in the rear left, and we're going to click Next. And then we're going to be done. We're going to click the Finish button, and the new device will be added. Now, if you aren't launching LightBurn for the first time, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see a place we can go to actually configure the device after the fact. So click the button, and you'll basically see the same type of options that we saw when running the wizard. With a little bit of luck, and assuming that you've followed these instructions, you should now be able to communicate with your Ruida DSP using LightBurn software. Happy laser cutting. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I'll talk to you next time.